Hey everybody, my name is Jerry Williams, aka Greater Sapien. Thanks for stopping by. I don't really have a script for this today. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head. I have a few bullet points written down on the screen that I'll speak to, and maybe stick some pictures up here in post. But I'm just gonna kind of talk what's about some things that are going on right now. You haven't heard from me in a while, so I thought I'd just throw something together. Look, things are kind of crazy. There's a lot going on in the United States right now. And got to say, the president of the United States isn't helping. We don't really have presidential leadership at the moment. This is a man who claimed when he was running for office that he's the only one to cure the problems of this country. He's the only one that had the answers. And yet, as problems have come forward, all he has done is make excuses for them not going his way. He doesn't take responsibility for anything he said. I know I've said that before, but it's true. He doesn't take responsibility for anything he says. For example, with COVID-19, it's been China, the WHO, states are not managing their material correctly. Obama left the cupboards bare. Now, early on, when everything started happening, he had no issues with China, none whatsoever. He had no issues with the WHO. Back when he thought that this was going to be cleared up quickly, that he was talking about how him and his people were talking about how it was contained and it was all under control. He didn't have any criticisms for anybody because everything was just running perfectly. He said that the media were inflating things, and the Democrats were inflating the issue in order for their own political gain. But that's the only criticism he had going on, because everything was going to work out fine for him. But as things have not gone fine for him, as the death toll has gone up, and as more and more he gets on camera and embarrasses the nation and shows poor leadership, the more he's had to go back and kind of retroactively say, well, these are the problems that started all this. China didn't give the proper information. The WHO was withholding things and in the pocket of China. The states are not managing the things correctly. We did everything perfectly. There's nothing I would do differently. And Obama left the cupboards bare. And even if Obama had left the cupboards bare, and I'm not even taking that as a fact, that was over 3 years ago. As the president, it's his job to make sure the cupboards aren't bare. What was he doing this entire time? What were his people doing this entire time? And he was asked that question, and he said, well, I had a lot of things going on. Fuck that. You have a lot of people. Somebody should be on it. So even if we go by the premise, which I believe is false, that Obama left the cupboards bare, it's your job to refill the cupboards, and you didn't do it. And if the cupboards were bare early on, you should have said right off the bat, hey, we got to take care of things. The cupboards are bare right now, but we're going to take care of it. But no, you said everything was fine. You said that you were getting everything out to everybody. And then all of a sudden, it's Obama's fault. This is what I mean by he doesn't take responsibility for anything. So now we're at 100,000 plus deaths related to COVID-19. Now, early on, I talked about this, and I had a scenario that had like 70,000 deaths in it. And people were saying that I was being a fear monger and that I was just telling people to be afraid when I was just discussing flattening the curve. And I got a lot of feedback on that. But it's been 3 months and we have over 100,000 deaths. That's only 90 days or so. People try to compare it to the car accident rate. It's like, 48,000 people die a year from car accidents. Well, guess what? That's a whole year. This is only 90 days, 3 months. And that's with the slow ramp up. And then it starts to really accelerate. We still have more to go on this. We're probably going to end up in the 150,000 range on this by August or so. Who knows what's going to happen in the whole next year. But this concept that I was overblowing things, and that it was no different than the seasonal flu. It's just going to be nothing. Was bullshit, and you guys are silent about it now. Now, like I said, I don't have this thing scripted. I'm just kind of rolling here. Let me say that this may end up being like the seasonal flu in the end. Best case scenario, this will end up like the seasonal flu. The thing about the seasonal flu is, yes, it has a death rate of about 0.13% or something like that. But that's with a vaccine, and that's with a considerable amount of herd immunity. So the flu is dangerous. The seasonal flu is quite dangerous. So I do have a little bit of problem when people say, "Oh no, it's so much worse than the seasonal flu." The only reason it's worse than the seasonal flu is because we don't have an immunity for it. But the seasonal flu is bad, but we already have vaccines and stuff for it. That's why we're not worried about it too much. Sure, we lose a certain number of people, but we have a baseline in order of protection with it. We don't have that with COVID-19, with this strain of the coronavirus. So eventually, yes, this is going to be, it's probably just going to end up being just like the seasonal flu. It's just going to end up being mixed in with that. We'll have a boost of deaths, seasonally, but that's not going to happen until we get through this part here. The problem with it right now is the fact that we don't have that immunity. That's why we have 100,000. Well, that's not why we have 100,000 deaths. One reason we have 100,000 deaths is this wasn't managed very well. And now I have people who will probably show up in the comments, and they've done it before, and they've hit me up on Twitter. Even some other skeptical people who normally agree with me, but disagree with me when it comes to Trump. They'll say, well, the original estimate was for 1.5 to 2.2 million people dying from this. The fact that there's only 100,000 people or 150,000 people, whatever it ends up being, is just a testament to how well Trump has done this. And Trump himself is already trying to spin this way. I call bullshit on that. First off, all the people who were telling me that the original estimate was 1.5 or to 2.2 million, and Trump's doing so good on this, are the same people who were telling me that this was going to be nothing, and that everyone is overblowing it. But now that it's big, you're saying, well, it was going to be much worse. Trump's doing great. But I call bullshit on that excuse, and this is why. That 1.5 to 2.2 million people dying of COVID-related issues was based on no one doing anything about it. That's what it was. If you go find the study and what that Dr. Birx and other people were talking about way back in March, that estimate was based on no one doing anything. If no one does anything about this, this is how many people could possibly die. And when they say no one does anything, that means no increased hand washing, no states closing down, no people choosing to work from home or to wear their own personal face mask. That's no one doing anything. We could have 1.5 to 2.2 million people die. Well, guess what? That was never going to happen. Before the CDC put their guidelines forward, before they dropped their own guidelines, states were already starting to make moves. Local municipalities were already starting to put their own things together. My company was already starting to put things together. I was already starting to work from home because my wife is immune compromised. So I was already starting to work from home. People were already starting to wear masks. And that's why they're like, hey, maybe you don't want to wear masks because we're short on masks. So that concept of no one ever doing anything was never going to happen. So Trump doesn't get credit for 1.5 or 2.2 million people not dying because that was never going to happen. even if Trump didn't do anything, if he didn't make any official decrees, people like me, the city of Oakland, the county of Alameda, the state of California, other states, we were already going to do something. So Trump doesn't get to have credit for that. He doesn't. That number is bullshit. But he's going to run with it. He's going to say, when I heard that 2.2 million people could die, I took action. And that's why we only have 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 people. Remember, it was going to be, he said, 50,000. Okay, maybe 60, 65,000 we're talking about now. Now we're talking 80 to 90,000, maybe 100,000 now. Now it's 137,000. They're officially around, they're thinking around 137,000. So he kept charging up that number. Remember, he was saying, they said it was going to be 2.2 million, and I think it's just going to be 60,000. So he doesn't get to have that credit because he keeps moving the goalposts, and that was never a real number. So for just as a preemptive strike against those of you who are going to try to say that he should get credit for that, that's some bullshit. And so since he knows that he fucked up, he knows he's getting bad press for this. He knows every time he got up for those press conferences, he was making it worse. At least his people were telling him that, if they were helpful. He's been doing nothing but finding distractions. There was Obamagate. Oh, yes, let's just look over there. Let's talk about Obamagate now. That didn't go. That didn't fly. All it did was show that, oh, yeah, the Obama people were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And, oh, we got a little bit more insight on how much Flynn was actually screwing things up and working for other countries. We learned even more. That blew up in their face. He still tries a little bit, but that blew up in their face. And of course, attacking the media at all times. Always attacking the media. More specifically, he's like coming up with battles with Joe Scarborough, accusing a media person basically of murder as a distraction. You should be looking at that. You should be looking at that. His press secretary, she doesn't answer half the questions that she's given. Her job is to deflect. Well, why did the president say that? Well, what you should be looking at is why that person said that. That's what they do. They distract and they deflect. That's all they have right now. Voter fraud. Okay, mail-in ballots, voter fraud. We got to talk about that. They're going to steal the election. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about something else other than what's going on right here. And now it's online censorship. It's Twitter censorship. Oh, Twitter is censoring things because they put a fact check on one of his tweets. Fact checking is not censorship. I'm not saying that Twitter should censor people. What I'm saying is fact checking is not censorship. Putting something next to someone else's tweet. By the way, it's really embarrassing that there was an executive order that actually had the word tweet in it. It just brought the office of the presidency down so much for there to be this presidential decree talking about when someone on Twitter makes a tweet. It just sounds so childish. Sorry, that's a little digression. I just know when I read it, it just sounded so childish. Anyway, when a president or someone makes a comment and they add a little addendum next to it saying, for more information on this, blah, 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 blah. This may not be accurate, blah, 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 blah. That's not censorship. You can say it's editorializing, and you can argue, and there's an argument to be said that Twitter shouldn't be, or Facebook or YouTube shouldn't be editorializing, because like YouTube does the same thing. They put something up about flat Earth, and right under there they'll have a little thing about NASA. So you can make that argument that they shouldn't be editorializing. That's fine. But it's not censorship. And the president of the United States doesn't understand this, but it's not possible to censor the president of the United States. It's almost an impossibility. There is a way to censor the president of the United States, and it's illegal. It's illegal to do that, and that would be to eliminate him for talking. That would be illegal, That would be wrong. But short of that, there is no way to censor the President of the United States. They can delete his account. That's not censoring the President of the United States. The President of the United States has the biggest platform for speech anywhere in the world. He can step out of his house and just talk, and everyone will be there to see. He has his own website. He has his own press secretary. He can get on anytime he wants and make news. It is not possible to censor the President of the United States. But what he can do is he can make a point of whining and complaining and bitching like a tiny child about it to get people to think about that instead of what he's not doing, which is his goddamn job. That's what he can do. So there's a lot of protests going on right now. I'm in Oakland, California. I think the first night of protests are about to start down at Ogawa Plaza in downtown Oakland. Hopefully it goes well. I hear helicopters right now, but it's going to be light for another hour or so. So right now everything's going to be fine. But there's a lot of press going on, a lot of protests going on about the continuing victimization of black men at the hands of the police. Police violence on black men is back in the news again. I mean, it happens. It's been that way my entire life, but it's back in the news again, and it's a particularly terrible time. It's like a perfect storm of problems and tension for this kind of thing to happen. I mean, because everyone in this country is already on edge. We're on edge because our lives have been disrupted so much. People are stuck in the house. They can't do what they want to do or need to do. They're suffering financially, socially, just emotionally. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm not talking about just on black people. I'm talking about people in the nation altogether. And then we have the Arbery case coming to the forefront. And then you have like the woman in Central Park weaponizing her whiteness, for lack of a better term, to basically threaten the life of a black man in Central Park. And then there's some other ones that have popped up, and then you have the George Floyd case, where we just, again, much like the Arbery case, just watched a man get killed. We just watched him get killed by the police. In this case, the other was a former police person and his fuckwit of a family member. But so it's a powder keg going on. It's really tough right now. And of course, we have people trying to justify it by people going into Arbery's background and trying to say, well, he's a bad guy and this and that. It's like it has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. But you can trust racists in this country and racism in this country, because it's not always a person who's a racist that has this thing, but it's like the kind of the racist genetics of this nation that says we need to find a way to make it justify that this black man got killed, or this minority most of the time, but in this case, most of the time it's a black man. But we have to find a way of justifying his death. So we're going to look into his background. We're going to make sure he's a bad guy. So then we can say, yeah, he's a bad guy. There you go. And so they try to justify it. And then, when they say maybe if you just obeyed the law, this wouldn't happen. Yes, the police overstepped their bounds, but if you weren't doing anything in the first place, then they wouldn't have the opportunity to overstep their bounds. And that is bullshit on another scale, because you don't have to be doing anything. All you have to do is be at the wrong place at the wrong time for them. And yes, usually there's a reason for the violence to get to where it does. Is usually something like resisting arrest. Well, you resisted arrest, and thus we had to do this. But I'm sorry. If you pull somebody over and you accost them for something that they did not do, was not illegal, and they refuse to comply, if you're overstepping your bounds and they refuse to comply with you, then all of a sudden they're resisting arrest, and now you have a reason to put your hands on them. It's like it's almost a setup in a way. So we can't win. You can say just obey the law and it won't be a problem, and that's just not true. You just you can do everything they say. You can just be walking down the street and you can just be black, and usually male, but you can just be black. And now it's on you to do whatever you can to not get killed, because you're already obeying the law. So obeying the law wasn't doing it. Now you're following orders. There was a young man, it was in Texas, I think it was Midland, just earlier this week. I think the young man, 21 years old, he ran a stop sign or something like that. Now, I don't know if he didn't know he ran a stop sign and didn't really pay attention, but he ran a stop sign. So that's an infraction. Got it. So he gets pulled over, he makes it to his house, and then he pulls over. And the cops they're saying, get out of the car with your hands up, get out of the car with your hands up, which is perfectly justified for them to say. And he gets out of the car with his hands up. And less than a second, the moment he steps out of the car with his hands up, it's almost as if there is an activation button on this young man's door. Because as his door opens and he comes out, the guns come out. Now, they told him to get out of the car with his hands up. But the moment he does, the door's not even completely open. I watched the video a couple times. The door's not even completely open. It's like, come out with your hands up. They're ready to go. Because their mentality is to shoot, to be prepared to shoot. For a trap, yeah. So it doesn't matter if you do what they say. That doesn't necessarily help us. So the concept of just obey the law is false. And then some of you fools are going to bring up, well, what about black on black crime? That's all I have. That's pretty much all I have to say to that. Because none of you people care, as you could bring it up, none of you care about black on black crime unless you're trying to use that to say, don't think about this crime. I haven't heard anybody talk about black on black crime for a while. But all of a sudden, when someone says something about police violence, all of a sudden it's like, hey, but what about black on black crime? Don't talk about it because you don't care about it. It's a distraction. We're talking about this right now. Anyway. And someone asked me the other day, someone showed me, can't remember who it was, but the picture, I'll probably show it up here. Because there's the different protests going on right now. There's the protest that's happening right now for the George Floyd murder. And that's been going on for a while. I think we're on the fourth day of protest. But when it first started out, it was generally peaceful. And but it was met immediately with tear gas before it even got out of hand. It was like, we're going with tear gas. We're going for it. And people said, they showed a lot of these photos kind of side by side of, these guys came with nothing, just face masks like they're supposed to, and bare hands and just, protest signs, and were protesting what happened. And they got met with tear gas and, riot gear. While these folks who were protesting the quarantine and they wanted to open the nation back up came with, guns and military gear, and they were actively pushing police and stuff, and they got left alone for the most part. Really, for the most part. There maybe one person got arrested at one point, but it was the police were incredibly peaceful to these people who were yelling in their face, getting in their face, screaming while holding guns. But the police were hands off. And it's one of those things where if protesting is perfectly legal, so they have to cross a line for you in order to stop them. So generally, if a protester touches a police officer, that's it. They're like, hey, you can protest all you want. Second you touch a police officer, now we're going to take you in. Sometimes a police officer will will make sure they get big and are kind of threatening to the protester. So then the protester just feels like just push them away. And then all of a sudden the police can say, hey, you touched me, boom, you're going. But with these, open up the country folks, they were interacting with the police all the time, pushing on them, yelling at them, spitting on them with guns. And we're being left alone. And so people wondered, what is the difference? Why? And there's the idea, and it's a valid one, that there's a major racial difference here between these two groups. And honestly, that's probably it. But I have another theory about this, about why these protesters were left alone, while these protesters, the hammer was put on them. These protesters here, and my thought is this, that the police, in this case, know something about the protesters, the type of protesters. And that's my dog going there. Sorry about that. These protesters, the one with the guns, the police know something about them. That they're not going to do shit. They're not. Yeah, they've got guns to make themselves look big and tough, but they're cowards. They're not going to do shit. These are a bunch of flaccid, impotent, do-nothings. They talk a lot, but aren't going to do shit to affect shit. They are not a threat. They're just all bluster. They're not fighting for anything of real value to them. They're fighting for luxuries. They're fighting for things, they're arguing for things that they want. It's not fundamental. They're not willing to lay down their lives for these things that they're asking for. They're full of shit. These are cowardly, just weak, mostly men, cowardly, weak men with their guns. And the police know they're not going to do shit. These protesters, on the other hand, they have something worth dying for. They're talking about something worth risking their lives for. And that's their lives. The things that these protesters are talking about are fundamental. It's survival. They're perfectly willing to step up and risk their life. Why? Because their lives are already at risk and always have been. And so the police know to a certain degree, maybe I'm giving a little more credit than they should, but they know to a certain degree that these guys mean business. They will do what they need to do to affect change. While the ones with guns ain't gonna do shit. But these folks, you can tell by the look in their eye when they come forward that this is serious. This is about life or death. And so they're willing to put their lives on the line. And that scares the police. That scares them. They know that these people can actually affect change. And so they have to be put down. They have to be stopped in some way or another. So I was talking with my son the other day. It was a while ago. It was a couple months back, probably. It might have been before all this. It might have been when the whole quarantine started. But he reads online blogs, he watches videos, and he says, "Hey, have you heard that people are talking about, these right wingers are talking about there being a revolution, that they're going to rise up, the Second Amendment people are going to rise up and take back the country. Especially if Trump loses, they're going to rise up." And I said, "No, they're not. They're not." He says, "Why not?" Because he's like, he hears them say these things and they sound so serious. And he says, why aren't they? I said, because white people have it too easy. They're not going to rise up. They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. They're not going to bite the capitalist system. It helps them too much. They're not going to do it. They'll talk. But since the things that they're talking about, fighting for supposedly, are luxuries, they're not going to lay their lives down for it. They're not. But they'll bring the guns and they'll talk about it and maybe hopefully you can scare you into just doing what they want, but they're not going to fight for it. If real change is going to happen, if there's going to be a revolution in this country, it's going to be minorities doing it. It's going to be black and brown people doing it. He says, why? He said, because they've had to do it before. Black and brown people have had to fight for their lives their entire life. That's what we've had to experience that. And so, yeah, when it comes down to it and change needs to happen, we are the ones who are going to do it. But the Second Amendment people, no. They don't have it in them. They've never had to fight for anything in their lives. Not this bunch of people. So, that's my opinion on that. But I'm not going to debate police violence, racial injustice here. I'm not. I know people in the threads are going to ask me, "What do you think about this? What about that?" I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to debate what the proper way of protesting is, because there's no proper way of protesting that's allowable by the mass, by the majority of the non-minorities in this country. There's no way to protest racial injustice that's acceptable. So I'm not going to even debate it. Take a knee, how dare you? March the streets, how dare you? Throw a rock, how dare you? It doesn't matter. There's no way you can do it. And all these fools talk about, well, Martin Luther King said this and that. Yeah, and they killed him. So there's no way. Peace doesn't work either. So I'm not going to debate what the proper way of doing it is. Because most of you, and I appreciate most of my fans, there's my hate fans, I don't appreciate them too much, but I appreciate most of my subs, but most of you, the vast majority of you, do not understand what I go through when things like this happen, what I experience, how it affects me at a core level. It's not possible. When the Arbery case, when that murder was, that video first came out, I don't know, it was the first day or the second day, I watched it. I should not have done it. I was in the backyard, was finishing up work. Should not have watched it. But I was frozen in place. I just sat there still for 15, 20 minutes. I don't know how long it was. And I sat there stationary because I didn't know what to do with my arms and my legs. I just didn't know what to do with them. I just had to sit still as my skin hummed, as my cells just vibrated, wanting to just do something, but there was nothing to do. There's part of you that wants to just scream, that just wants to run, that just wants to fight, that just wants to just destroy. And part of you that just wants to cry, and it all happens at once. And so you're immobile. And my wife came in. She came out. She was inside and I was outside. So she came out and she's like, "What's up?" And I told her, I don't know how I told her, but I told her what I had just watched. And she kind of just said, "Oh, I'm going to leave you alone." And she left. And I had never been more happy for the quarantine than I was that day. I was incredibly appreciative of the fact that I wasn't really allowed to go out and interact with people, because that's the last thing I wanted to do. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't know how I would come across. I don't know how I would feel if anyone spoke to me. So I was incredibly appreciative that I didn't have the choice of going outside. But I was rooted in place, because he was either that or explode. And unless you can understand that, we can't have this conversation of what racial injustice, police violence, how it affects me and my people. We just can't. We can't have that discussion. But I appreciate whatever sentiment you might have. You're entitled to your opinions. So I don't really have much more to say about any of this, except for one thing. And it's going to sound trite when I say it. When I say that I'm tired of, I don't want to see these videos of Black men being assaulted by the police and killed by the police, these recordings. I don't want to see them anymore, but not for the reason that I just don't want them to exist. I don't like what I see in them on another level, and I'm tired of seeing it, and I hope to never see it again. If something like that is happening and you're a witness to it, I understand the need to record it. That's the only thing that makes this thing real to people. So if you're there, record it. But unless you're recording it, unless there's just you can't stand by and let it happen anymore. You just can't. I understand if it's just you, record it. Someone has to record it. But if someone's recording and there's someone else there, you can't stand by anymore. You have to step in. You have to intervene. You have to save these people from the assassination, the execution that's about to happen to them, potentially happen to them. Hear the helicopter starting. We don't have the option of standing by anymore. Now, I understand that interfering with an officer in the execution of his job is a crime. But it's a crime that we have to be willing to commit. We need to put ourselves in there. And if the execution of his job is wrong, if he is not doing his job, then he needs to be stopped, mostly he. So we need to step in. Break it up. Not assault. Don't need to assault anyone. But we need to get in between them. We need to separate them. We need to give our brothers and sisters room to breathe. We just have to. We have to be willing to put our lives on the line, to put our careers on the line, to be arrested, to save our lives, because our lives are at risk here. So no more standing by. No more standing by. You can't just watch. We can't just stand by and watch our brothers die. Not anymore.